Hello and welcome back to GAPCast and GAPTrax. My name is Debbie Foreman and I'm your host. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Usually I do GAPcasts, which are the reactions to YouTube videos by infamous people or companies that talk about systemic gaps that hinder progress. And then after that reaction, I move on to the second recording, which is the GAPTrax, the tricks and the hints that we use to fill those gaps through frameworks. But today is a little bit different, because I actually watched this video, and so it's not a raw reaction. I saw it, it was sent to me, and I realized it doesn't require the framework that we use in the coursework. It has a precursor, which is everything that we base in our ebook. So I'm just going to go through the whole recording, and I'm going to be showing parts of the ebook that correspond to it, because in that ebook, which is the awareness phase of what are gaps? What are the world of gaps? What are the systemic gaps? What are the problems that cause gaps? So on and so forth. And then because of that, with that ebook, you can download it. We're going to supply the link to you. Click on it, download it, and then you'll be able to see that when you identify with that situation, there is a solution.
New college grads has recently surged, and some economists say businesses are now replacing entry-level jobs with artificial intelligence.
Roughly 7 million people are actively hunting for work. Millions more have given up looking entirely. Yet companies across every sector are complaining they can't find qualified candidates. The explanation you'll hear from boardrooms to political stages: the skills gap.
And there I'm going to stop for the first one, skills gap. So what we're going to be going through right now is there a skills gap? Is the skills gap real? How is the skills gap used to manipulate hiring and firing and unemployment and policies such as education and immigration? So is there a skills gap? Yes. Is the skills gap real? Yes. Is the skills gap necessary to have? Can it be solved? And why is it being manipulated? Okay, so these are things that I want to go through. But one of the first things I want to talk about here is we're looking at our ebook, okay? And I'm going to be jumping pages here because they're talking about it in a different order than we have it. But one of the things that we start off at, and I'm going to come scrolling down, you guys can look at this on your own, is what is a gap? So let's talk about it first. What is a gap? It's the distance between, and there's different types of gaps, but the skills that you possess and the skills you lack. Is the skills gap the only gap that hinders progress within the workforce? No, and we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about what you perceive and what you know, what you intend, what you achieve, effort you give, results you get. And as you go through this, when you download the ebook, you're going to be able to see more examples and you're going to be able to find yourself within that. Okay, so let's keep going.
"20-year-old Jesus Vegas trains in advanced construction technology, building a future in an industry supposedly desperate for workers. Survey data shows 87% of Americans believe they'll need new skills and training throughout their careers just to stay employed. It's an
So here it's 87% believe they will need, and I don't know if 100% of the information we're getting here is accurate, because I want to take a look at this. They're going to need, 87% of Americans believe they're going to need to reskill. If your skills are outdated, then you don't have the minimum skills. Are all skills required? No, they're not. But when we look at that, and this is what I wanted to get into here, we're going to jump all the way down. I think it's to page 9. And you can come back to this, is the question, and this is a really big question. They're going to have to reskill because they're getting outdated. And when you download this ebook, I want you guys to come here. You're going to do this exercise, and it's actually really simple to do, and it's complicated or complex to be able to fulfill. What did you learn in school? Do you need it for work? These are two very simple questions. So is there really a skills gap? And what is required? Now, what they're going to be presenting at some point through this is, are all skills that are on a job posting actually required? Maybe, maybe not. If they aren't required, then how do you show for them? And if you can't show for them, how do you convince them that by not having them, you're still a qualified candidate? So this is the World Economic Forum's list of skills that are going to be most required for the 2030 job market. So what do they say? Did you learn in school? Yes or no? And do you need it at work? Yes or no? Analytical thinking and innovation. Was that taught to you? Probably not. Do you need it? Yes. If you don't have it, how do you show that you don't have it? And that's okay. Active learning and learning strategies. Was that taught at school? Probably not. Do you need it? Yes. It's probably going to be in a job requirement. If you don't have it, how do you compensate the difference? Complex problem solving. Yes or no? In school, do you need it at work? Critical thinking and analysis. Did you learn that at school? Do you need it for work? Creativity, originality, and initiative. Did you learn that at school? Do you need it for work? Remember, the World Economic Forum's list of most required skills. If they are required, then you don't have them. Then how do you convince somebody to hire you for the price that you are worth? Leadership and social influence. Technology use, monitoring and control, technology design and programming, resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. Resilience, stress tolerance, and flexibility. Can somebody please show me that on a school curriculum? Is there a rubric for that? But do you need it at work? Most people are hired for their hard skills and fired for the lack of the soft skills. That's not getting a job in the first place, but it's losing the job that you already have because these real life skills, I'm not going to call them soft skills, I'm going to call them real life skills. So if you're not flexible, you don't have stress tolerance, and you're not resilient, well, then how do you keep the job? Reasoning, problem solving, and ideation. This is now a very complex market. And can anybody have all of these? Yeah, maybe. Do we have it all at the top of our game? Definitely not. And the big question is, when this falls into a job posting for you to be hired, how do you convince the hiring body that, yes, these are skills that are in development, they're things that you're working on, so on and so forth, okay? So let's now go back to the video.
Elegant narrative, clean, simple, almost entirely fiction. The skills gap serves as a remarkably convenient scapegoat for deeper problems in today's labor market. This framing shifts blame entirely onto workers. They chose the wrong major, developed the wrong expertise, failed to predict market demands. It's your fault you're unemployed. It's your fault you can't find work. It's your fault the economy isn't working for you. Except the skills gap has a curious habit of vanishing during economic booms. Research from Harvard, Northwestern University, and the Federal Reserve examined over 36 million job postings across 3 years. What they discovered: required skills and experience correlate almost perfectly with unemployment rates. When unemployment rises and applicants flood the market, suddenly every entry-level position demands 5 years of experience. But when unemployment drops and applicants become scarce, those same companies happily hire whoever walks through the door.
Okay. I don't agree with 100% of it. Yes, they're shifting the blame. How are you supposed to know what career to get into if those skills are going to be diminished or more required in the future? Hard one. Is it the blame on us, or they're shifting it to us, the responsibility? What I believe is bigger, and there's a systemic global problem, is that gaps, not just the skill gap, gaps hinder progress. If you are able to develop one skill and one skill only in life, and that skill is how to be able to close and, well, let's start with address gaps, tackle them, and close them as they appear. It doesn't matter if you have a skill gap. It doesn't matter if you have an emotional gap. It doesn't matter if you have a relational gap. It doesn't matter if you have an age gap, if you know how to tackle gaps in the first place.
The skills gap vanishes like morning fog. This isn't discrimination. Companies can legally set whatever requirements they choose. When unemployment is high, they get greedy. Pure business strategy. The problem is how this myth gets weaponized to justify practices that harm workers and distort labor policy.
that gets me back to exactly what I was saying. Because this manipulation exists, if there's only one skill you need in life, it's the skill of how to overcome any gap that comes. Because then when the shift is, or the blame comes to you, you're able to volley that back, just throw it back into anybody's court. It's the biggest skill you can
Start with
develop.
the most direct impact, lower salaries. A company posts a position requiring skills A, B, C, D, and E. Nobody meets all 5 requirements because the company designed it that way. They circle back to their best applicant with a reduced offer, pointing to the gaps in their resume as justification.
If a company circles back to you with their best offer, and you know that they're not going to be using all of the skills that are required, but you have the skill to cover the gap of that of which being required, which is perception. How do you get them to perceive the perception gap? Let's take a look at that for a sec. Let's go back up here. All right, go back to your ebook. What you perceive and what you know. How do you get people to actually perceive what you know, or to perceive what they need to know? So perception is a very big skill to develop in filling gaps, and then it really doesn't matter what's on that job posting as long as they perceive that you can do the job, correct? Let's go back to that. So I've scrolled through the ebook a little bit. We're going to keep jumping around, but they're talking about how do you get them to perceive like that if you have to have a whole list of skills and you only have a few of them, then they're going to come back to you and say, oh, you don't have all of them, so I'm going to lower your wage. Well, I'm going to call that the BS factor. If you know how to work perception and you know how to close the gap in perception, so instead of having to have all the skills, you're able to close the gap that they perceive that even though you don't have it, yeah, you're able to move forward and they should pay you more. Perception. All right, let's keep
MIT
moving
researchers
forward.
found that most American job postings demand skills completely irrelevant to actual job performance. They focused on IT help desk technicians. Most companies require programming knowledge for these positions. The kicker? Most IT help desk workers never program anything, ever. The researchers discovered programming skills were equally useful in IT support and manufacturing plant operations. But factory machine operators received on-the-job training for programming their equipment, while IT workers were expected to arrive with coding expertise already mastered. The result? Thousands of qualified candidates get filtered out or accept lower salaries because they lack a skill they'll never actually use. But
Okay, here we go. I'm back to this again. So let's take a look. What are we talking about here? And this is right here on the cover. You guys go to the ebook. Closing systemic gaps. What is the gap that they're talking about? Oh, they're going to say that you need A, B, or C, but they're not going to actually use it because you don't have it. They're going to lower your wage. Only if they perceive that you can't do the job without it. So the whole big question is, how do you close systemic gaps? She's talking about systemic gaps here. They're showing systemic gaps, a gap in an entire system. So if you're able to battle the system, you're able to overcome the system and you can win.
wages tell only part of the story. The skills gap myth has become an industrial strength lobbying tool for reshaping migration policy, education funding, and workplace protections. If genuinely well-paying positions sat empty due to skills mismatches, market forces would drive people to retrain. That's basic economics. It's not happening. Why? According to the Society for Human Resource Management, the hardest positions to fill include nursing, teaching, skilled trades, and social services. A newly licensed registered nurse in San Francisco might earn $85,000 annually, which sounds reasonable until you realize median rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $3,000 per month. Teachers.
Well, here they're talking about the difference between skills, filling job, like really required jobs. I mean, nursing is very important, but and salary and wage. But there's another part that's not being talked about, which is passion. What if your passion is to be a nurse? And what if your passion is saying, listen, I don't mind making a little bit less because I really want to work with my passion. So the question is the skill that's missing, Or is it the ability to help people and persuade them to follow their passions, and as they follow their passions, to have a growth plan? Okay? I'd like to
And
think about that
nurses
too.
need expensive college degrees, often $50,000 to $100,000 in debt before earning anything, followed by a
Do college, university, or university degrees pay off today? Is it worth spending a couple $100,000 to get a degree? Or do you just need to spend, I don't know, what is it, $98 to do GAPTrax, learn to close the gaps, and do segmented hard skills, technical skills, and as the market shifts, keep doing those technical skills because you've already acquired the ability to tackle the systemic gaps?
additional
Big question.
training before receiving full compensation. The math doesn't work. There's no skill shortage. There's a shortage of people willing to accept difficult jobs for inadequate compensation. Now, here's where someone might object. But what about rapidly changing technology? Surely some skills gaps are real. Fair point. Contrast the supposed nursing shortage with tech industry growth through the 2000s. Computer science programs exploded because the sector offered genuine
We're gonna listen to this a little bit because I think you guys should listen through as we go through. But we all know that there's booms in technology, and the boom requires mass hiring, get those skills up and running, automate again, fire, get it up. But that means that you have spurts, growth spurts. It's like being a kid going into teenage years. You're going to have a growth spurt, then you're going to stagnate, growth spurt, and stagnate. And I want to look at that for one sec right here. All right. When we talk about systemic gaps, and remember, you can download this ebook and we can get to them, but we're talking about the problem set, okay? And one of them, the problem set of gaps represents itself with four main problems. And they're going to go through this to the end of this probably, which is stagnation. So you have a burst, then you stagnate. And if you're stagnant, you're going to plummet because nobody wants anybody stagnant. Then they're talking right now about qualification. What is qualification? Well, if you have qualification but don't know the ability for the application, how do you apply it to changing markets? So stagnation, qualification, and the ability to be flexible, resilient. That's a big one. Competition. Now you're competing for that job market. There's not enough supply and demand. There's not enough jobs and too many people. So how do you show that perceived value of filling the gap and to stand out? Well, what about when there's not enough skilled labor and there's too many jobs? How do you show you're competitive in that market? And always the results. So when you get into this cycle of stagnation, qualification, competition, the results just aren't there. It's because you haven't been able to tackle systemic gaps. All right. And they're talking only about the skill gap and the shift of the skill gap onto the human. Schools do not teach gap filling. They do not. They work on independent and individualized skills. So what I have to say is get yourself ready for the future growing market, knowing how to address gaps. It doesn't matter what gap, because once you do that, all the rest becomes easier and you make more money.
professional respect, reasonable work-life balance. Starting salaries for software engineers hit $100,000 plus, with signing bonuses and stock options. Fast forward to today. Too many qualified programmers, cooling tech sector, hundreds of thousands laid off. Just 5 years ago, these same companies claimed they'd hire any programmer they could find. So yes, temporary mismatches can exist during rapid technological shifts. But if gaps persist year after year while wages stagnate, that's not a skills gap. That's a compensation gap.
Okay, so she's talking about a compensation gap. She went from skills gap to compensation gap, to a systemic gap, to a market gap, to a perception gap. They're all gaps, 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 gaps everywhere. Fill your gaps. Download this ebook. Learn. Fill those gaps. Because once you fill them, it doesn't matter.
Rating as a shortage. The real test is simple. Are companies willing to pay enough to attract workers to retrain? If not, the shortage isn't real. The training industry saw this gold mine coming from miles away. Politicians score easy points promoting retraining programs. Companies offload training costs onto workers or taxpayer-funded government initiatives.
Okay, so I'm going to offload a training program for you guys. Train to fill gaps. $98. You're done. Train to fill gaps. That's it.
Allied Market Research values the corporate training market at $361 billion, projected to hit $800 billion by 2035. That's more than the entire GDP of Switzerland, built on convincing people they're one certification away from landing a job, supposedly desperate to find them. Companies wield the skills gap as a lobbying cudgel. Siemens paid The Atlantic to publish content advocating apprenticeships as the solution to skills shortages.
Skills shortages. What skills? The skill of closing gaps? You don't need an apprenticeship. You just need to learn to do it.
Siemens funded
don't
this
buy in.
messaging because they wanted taxpayers to fund training that would directly benefit their hiring pipeline. Then there's the most politically explosive application, immigration policy. Let's be clear from the start. This isn't an argument against immigration. It's an argument against using manufactured skills gaps to justify labor practices that harm both domestic and foreign workers. In America, H-1B and EB-3 skilled worker visas allow companies to hire foreign workers for specialized roles.
Okay. I need to calm myself down on this one. If there is a set of missing skills in the United States and we can import labor, which is, I think it's great, that means that the American educational system is not teaching a set of skills that need to be taught. Let's say that again. If we're importing labor because the skills are missing, it's because our educational system is not teaching the skills that need to be taught, which goes back exactly to what we were talking about. Do you learn it in school? Do you need it at work? So what do you need to do? Demand your policymakers to start teaching real-life skills.
Supposedly unfillable by Americans. But when job requirements are artificially inflated, it becomes easier to justify overseas hiring. A company posts a position requiring 5 years of experience with a software framework that only existed for 3 years. Surprise, no qualified American applicants. And here's the insidious part. Those foreign workers depend on company sponsorship to remain in the country. Which employee will be more willing to accept substandard conditions, less likely to demand raises or report violations? This creates a two-tier labor system where
They're talking about abusive conditions on the job market. Do they exist? Of course they exist. But if you're able to fill the perceived gaps, if you're able to work with filling systemic gaps, then you're able to defend the right to a proper work environment. People don't learn to defend themselves. It's as simple as that. Learn.
Visa-dependent workers have less negotiating power, which suppresses wages for everyone. Fair immigration policy can benefit everyone. But when immigration becomes a tool for wage suppression through manufactured skills gaps, it serves only corporate profit margins while pitting workers against each other. So what's actually happening here? The skills gap isn't a labor market problem. It's not a training problem. It's not even really about skills. It's a narrative device that lets employers, politicians, and training providers avoid addressing actual systemic failures.
There she goes. Systemic failures. Didn't we just talk about that? Here we go. Systemic gaps. If there are systemic failures, that's because they're systemic gaps. And if it's systemic, and you can beat the system by learning to address gaps from beginning to end, then you beat the system. It really is that simple.
Wages haven't kept pace with productivity gains. American workers are more productive than ever, yet real wages have barely budged in decades. Companies would rather claim they can't find qualified workers than admit they won't pay competitive salaries. Training costs have been offloaded from employers to workers. Previous generations received.
If training costs have been offloaded, they said this once before, then offload it yourself for $98 and then get it over with. I keep saying $98, but that's all it is. You can really, really overcome this entire process by upskilling, by closing gaps. People don't teach this. That's why we teach it. This is why we've been doing this for 35 years. And this is why I get so frustrated when I see these types of videos, because it goes over and over. Yeah, education doesn't teach it. You don't learn it at school. You need it at work. The job postings aren't correct. The labor markets shift. There's rise in demand and in employment, what's required, what's not required. But once you are the gap-filling master to conquer the system, you got it.
On-the-job training. Now you're expected to arrive fully formed and pay for the privilege. Credential inflation runs rampant. Jobs that once required high school diplomas now demand bachelor's degrees, not because tasks changed, but because employers can demand more when labor supply exceeds demand.
Hiring bodies can demand more if you can't convince them that you're the best candidate. If you can convince them that they can't live without you, and you know how to close that gap, they'll hire you.
Failures into individual shortcomings. You didn't train right. You chose the wrong career path. It's spectacularly effective misdirection. When labor markets tighten and unemployment drops, the skills gap mysteriously resolves itself. Suddenly, companies discover they can train workers after all. Requirements become flexible. The crisis evaporates, until the next recession provides cover for raising barriers again. Jesus Vegas. Learning advanced construction technology at 20 isn't the problem. The problem is a labor market that treats workers as disposable while claiming desperate need.
Everybody's disposable. In the job market, on a capitalistic market, in a democracy, we are all disposable. It is our job to keep up and to make ourselves non-disposable. It's just a reality. It's the world that we live in. So make yourself irreplaceable by closing systemic gaps and knowing how to let people know that you know how to do that. Because yes, we are all replaceable.
For their skills that demands extensive credentials while refusing to provide training or adequate compensation. Real solutions require honesty about what's broken. Pay people fairly for difficult, necessary work. If you can't fill positions year after year, you're not offering enough money. Full stop. Bring back employer-sponsored training. Companies that claim they can't.
Bring back employer-sponsored training. They're going to train what? They're going to train what's in their interest. No. Yes, I mean, it's good. And obviously you need training at your job. But train what's in your interest. So you can change employers.
Can't find qualified workers while refusing to train promising candidates aren't facing a skills gap. They're facing a willingness to invest gap. Distinguish fair immigration from wage suppression. Immigration policy should be based on genuine economic needs and fair labor practices, not manufactured shortages. Recognize credential inflation for what it is. Requirements should match actual job demands, not serve as filters for reducing applicant pools when unemployment is high. The skills gap myth persists because it's useful to powerful interests. It shifts responsibility, justifies low wages, influences policy, and generates billions for the training industry. Meanwhile, millions of capable people sit unemployed or under.
Millions of capable people. Capable of what? Capable of doing a part of a job posting. Capable of, yes, have skills and there's capabilities. But if the capabilities require you today to convince the hiring body to perceive that you're irreplaceable or that you're needed, then that's all you need to do. It's as simple as that. You need to learn to be able to communicate, to show that you are capable, regardless of that job posting, or within that job posting. I'm not going to say regardless of, but within that job posting. Perception. What do they perceive? How do they perceive it? How am I going to tackle the systemic gap? How am I not going to be a victim of society? How am I not going to be a victim of this warped system?
Employed, told their struggles reflect personal inadequacy rather than systematic manipulation. The gap isn't in skills, it's in honesty. And until we close that gap, until we stop letting corporations hide behind this myth, millions of capable Americans will keep hearing they're not qualified for jobs that don't actually exist.
The jobs exist, and you can tackle it. You can tackle it by being an expert in systemic gaps and showing that you're capable.
At wages that were never real to begin with. The solution isn't more training, it's more accountability.
All right, there we go. One of my favorites. Accountability. Are you guys ready for this one? There we go. Accountability. Accountability is the glue that ties commitment to results. And now I want to talk about two types of accountability. There's the to be accountable for. So let's read that out. It's legal, compliance, requirements. That's where check and balance is. When you are required by a third party by the rules and processes, you're accountable to follow the law, you're accountable to be an upstanding citizen, you're accountable for paying your taxes, you're accountable for whatever contract or job or employment you signed for. You might not like it. You could actually hate it, but you do it because you are accountable for. But what they're talking about, part of it is here to feel accountable for. And that's the badge of honor that we wear on our sleeve. If I don't do it, nobody else will. And that's moral, it's ethical. When that happens, a lot of the times we say, I feel accountable. I am accountable for, because if I don't do it, no one else will. And that's where conflict arises, because you're not flexible. You feel like you're the only one that can do it. And that becomes overwhelming and it creates conflict. So when they talk about accountability, be very careful in anything that you do to be accountable for or to feel accountable for. If you have the feeling, but you're not accountable for it, chuck it or monitor it. Learn to close that gap, because a call of duty is moral. And if that makes you happy and you like to do it and it gets you going, that's great. If it creates conflict, you stick to being accountable for.
It's recognizing that when companies claim they can't find workers while refusing to raise wages, offer training, or provide decent working conditions, the problem isn't the workers. The problem is the lie we keep telling ourselves about why the labor market is broken.
All right, so they end like why the labor market is broken. I want to walk you guys through this. Download the ebook and start thinking about it. Let's look at it as a systemic global problem, because gaps are a systemic global problem in human development. And yes, you can develop everlasting life transformation. Okay? Download this. It's a little bit about me, but we don't need that. What are gaps? We talked about that. There's a few of them here. There's more that you're going to go through when you, if you go on to GAPTrax. The problem set. Understand what problems gaps cause. Not just skill gaps, gaps. Systemic gaps. Here we go. And we're gonna, I thought I just saw systemic gaps, but yeah, there's systemic gaps. What does it cost? Invisibility, when you're not unable to close those systemic gaps. Why closing gaps matters for you in professional development, in personal growth. The emotional and human dimension, because what she's talking about is like, you can't get the job and the problem is shifted to you, so on and so forth. But if you're able to close emotional gaps, fear, frustration, the imposter syndrome, invisibility, those are the feelings behind it, but they cause deeper gaps. When you're able to close that, you're able to change the perception. You're going to go from fear to courage, frustration to strategy, invisibility to communication. And those are the skills. So we were looking at skills at the World Economic Forum, and that was what we were looking at here. Is it a yes or no? Are you able to do it? But then I'm going to bring you to the end. If you feel like all you need to do is really understand how gaps hinder progress, what the problem sets are, how you can create an everlasting impact with a purpose on the market, then all you need to do is to go into GAPTrax, 5 hours of coursework, 4 tracks, 6 episodes each, lots of assignments, brain boggling, sometimes frustrating, to get through it. Once you've gotten through it, you've elevated yourself for everlasting transformation. And then you can find out how to join us in the rest of our global development and our global tribe. I know I got a little frustrated on this podcast, and it is frustrating because we do have a global systemic problem. We have a problem that these gaps are getting wider and wider. Perception gaps, skill gaps, employment gaps, ageism gaps, economic gaps, geographical gaps. You could talk about religious or cultural, so on and so forth. Gender. It's one after another, after another, after another, after another. And each situation kind of demands an entire new, I need to skill for that. Address systemic gaps. Look at gaps as a problem, a global systemic problem. Learn them. Learn what it is. Learn how to address it. And then become empowered, because no one else teaches this, but it is talked about over and over and over. And that's why I'm doing this channel. That's why I'm doing this channel. So you guys can hear what's being said and see that no one is actually addressing this globally and systemically. Thank you for being here. Like, subscribe, join us, access the ebook, and I look forward to you on GAPTrax.